Hello everybody and welcome to the card games installment of our preview videos for AwSHUX, our Shut Up and Sit Down convention for 2021 autumn. So if you're new to this series, this is the important part. This might look like a Shut Up and Sit Down review. It's not. I haven't even played this game. What a crook I am. No, instead, this is Team Shut Up and Sit Down helping to show off games, upcoming games from publishers who can't necessarily always make it to conventions in 2021 due to ongoing everything. So, with that caveated, let's talk a little bit about Brian Boru, designed by Pierre Sylvester, with art by Deirdre DeBarra, and put out by Osprey Games. And what we have here is a very attractive combination trick-taking game and area control game. How does that work? Don't worry, I'm going to tell you, you're going to learn all about Mr. Brian Boru. And this is a game where between 3 and 5 players are going to step into the, I want to say, moccasins of Irish leaders trying to unite medieval Ireland. Now, you can see from the amount of components going on here, there's maybe a little bit more than a trick-taking game and an area control game, but we'll get to that. The basic thing you need to know is that players are going to be putting towns on these different areas of Ireland and trying to get majority bonuses, because at the end of the game, whoever has the most towns in a particular region is going to get a whole bunch of points for their trouble. So, how does this work? Well, you've got a big deck of cards here. This is the deck that's going to be powering the game and doing all of the work. And it's got 3 colors of suits and white cards which are wild and count as any suit. And then the way that the game is played is in each round, first off, you're going to shuffle up this deck and deal it out among all of the players. Like so. And then whoever is the kind of start player, whoever's holding this pink ring, is going to kick the round off by placing it on any town in Ireland. And that's the town you're all going to be battling for during this trick. If you don't know what trick-taking is or tricks are, don't worry about it. You'll get the gist by the end of this video. So whoever places the ring is then going to lead the trick by taking a card and plopping it in the middle of the table. Now, the card that you play has to be of the same color as the town you're fighting for. So in this case, this player has placed the ring on a blue town and played a blue card, so that's all kosher. And then every other player is going to choose, I mean, I'm doing this randomly, but obviously incredible care and deliberation will go into this, is going to choose a card from their hand to chuck into the trick. And then once you've all placed a card, you resolve that trick. So whoever wins the town is going to be the person who played the highest numbered card of the color that led the trick. So we're fighting for a blue town here, right? So we've got a blue 25, a blue 3, and a blue 9. That blue 25 is going to take it. But that player, unlike in a lot of normal trick-taking games, isn't the only person who gets anything. Oh no. You see, the icons you have printed on the cards, the thing at the top is what that card does if you win the trick. But those 2 things at the bottom, those are your choices of what you get if you lose. And then whoever wins the trick also starts the next trick and takes that pink ring. So we've got purple here, purple won that town, and is going to place a disc on there. So obviously, winning tricks is good because it takes control of towns, but you see all these tokens over here and all these other things going on around the board? They're what you're going to be interacting with when you lose tricks, which is basically going to be fighting Vikings, getting married to guys, and hanging out with the church. And I'll talk about all that in just a second. So this is the structure of the game. Players are all going to throw cards into sort of tricks. See who wins, they get the top of the card. Then whoever loses get a choice at the bottom of the card. And then all those cards you played go into the discard pile. And whoever won the trick places that pink ring on the next town and starts off the next trick. So that's all well and good and seems interesting. Now, let's talk about all these juicy little subsystems around the board. So nothing will actually happen in Brian Boru until you've played out all these tricks, which are going to see players collecting coins and slaying Vikings and getting renown. We'll talk about that in a second. But basically, you're going to keep playing until everyone has just 1 card left, at which point in a trick-taking game, you don't have choice anymore, you just play the card. In Brian Boru, that 1 card you've got left goes straight in the discard pile. So then the discard pile contains the entire deck, and then you're going to resolve these subsystems. So let's start with marriage, because marriage is fun. Any game with a marriage track, I love to engage with that. So as players are playing tricks, some players will have crept up this marriage track. And then whoever's at the top of the marriage track is going to marry that round's eligible bachelor. So in this case, we've got Cormac here. What a lovely man. And he's going to give you 2 victory points and a free town in Connacht. That bachelor then goes away and you're going to get a new bachelor for next round, bachelorette in this case. And this deck of married people is also acting as the game's timer. So in this case, we've got 3 random bachelors, but every game of Brian Boru will end with the deeply desirable Estrid, Princess of Denmark, who can do all kinds of absolutely ridiculous stuff. So that's marriage. Vikings, though, are terrific fun. So every round, you're going to flip a card. In this case, it was 10. And you're going to put that many Viking tokens in the corner. This is how many horrible Scandi dudes are going to charge over and try and do horrible things to Ireland. So as you're playing tricks, some cards will have icons that you sort of battle these Viking tokens, and you're going to take those tokens, and they're going to go in front of you. Now, at the end of a round, so what we're doing now with marriage and stuff, you're going to see if there are any Viking tokens still in that corner. If there are, oh no, Vikings have invaded, and the player who has the least Viking tokens in front of them will lose a town to the Vikings. But whether the Vikings conquer a town or not, the person with the most Viking tokens then receives a renown token, one of these lovely suns, and then gets a victory point for every renown token that they have. So renown tokens get better the longer the game goes on. Oh, also at the very end of the game, you're going to get 1 victory point for each renown token that you have. Finally, over in this corner, we have the church. And as people are playing tricks, they're going to be placing tokens into this church area. And then at the end of the round, whoever has the most tokens up here is going to get an monastery built. Isn't the church nice? Name one thing the church has done that's bad. You can't do it. So you're going to take that monastery and you're going to place it around a disc of your choice. And that town counts as 2 towns for the purposes of area control. Then there's some other stuff like whoever has the second most sort of tokens in the church area is going to get a victory point. And whoever has 4 or more also gets a monastery. Monasteries for everyone. And that's upkeep. So once you've resolved who gets married, who gets, beaten up, and then who gets victory points from Vikings, and where and how monasteries get placed on the board, you're then going to take out that discard pile of all the action cards, you're going to shuffle it up, and you're going to deal it out again, and you're going to go again. In a 3-player game, you're going to do this 3 times. If you're playing with 4 or 5 players, you're going to do it 4 times. For all the interesting stuff going on in Brian Boru, this is not a complicated game. But what it is, both visually and mechanically, is just really clean and attractive and nice. I'm starting to associate this from publishers Osprey Games as well. The games they're putting out, especially in recent years, have just been getting better and better. And they're starting to become a publisher that I just know I can go to whenever I want something that is really interesting and also incredibly good looking and also has been tested to heck and back. I really want to try this. I'm very, very excited to get stuck into Ireland and take control of areas. And what else haven't I met? Look, there's even little stuff like there's roads, and then if you've got a town on a road, you can use some cards to pay money to have little additional towns on the road. This is just the kind of game where, as I was reading the manual, every rule I was like, oh yeah, and then I got to the next rule and I was like, oh yeah, and then the manual is over, and now I'm just really excited to play it. But I can't, because we need to see what the next game is.
This is Bequest from WizKids, a game about tactically splitting up loot between a bunch of evil minions. At the start of the game, the nefarious Dr. Schism has died from an unfortunate potion-based accident. And you, as his most loyal and humble servants, are taking it upon yourselves to steal all of his things and divide them up between yourselves. Of course, everyone wants an even spread of the loot, but you want a little bit better loot than everyone else. The person with the best stack of his stuff at the end of the game will be crowned the winner. It takes about 30 minutes to play, and we're going to play 5 different rounds, and each round starts in the same way, by dealing out 2 of these cards into Dr. Schism's secret vault. We'll get back to how you get your hands on these cards in a little while, but for now we're going to take the round deck, this is round 1, and deal out 5 cards to each player round the table. Once a player has received their hand of 5 cards, they get to take a long, hard look at the decisions in front of them. Each player will then split their hand of 5 cards into 2 groups, a group of 3 and a group of 2, or a group of 4 and a single card on its own. And they'll then take these cards and share them with their neighbour, placing them in those groups on these splitter boards, depending what way round this poker token is telling you to go. Each player then gets to look at the cards they were given and choose which pile they want by playing this poker chip face down in the middle of their board. Once each player is done, they will take the pile of cards they think best serves their needs, with the player who placed those cards taking the remainder. Now that is basically all of Bequest. You're going to be splitting up these cards between 5 rounds, and the player with the best set of cards at the end will win. But what constitutes a good set of cards? That is where the endgame scoring comes into play. At the end of the game, each kind of card in your stash will score differently. These influence cards will only score if you have more than a player to your left or right, and even more if you have more than both those players. Gadgets acts as sets. The more of each set you have, the more points each one is worth. Whenever a player gets a treasure card, they will flip it face down. And then at the end of the game, the first treasure card is worth 1 point. The second is worth 2, the third is worth 3, and the fourth is worth 4, and so on and so forth. If a player has 3 or more evidence cards, each one is worth -$3. Oof. These yellow hideout cards will give players the depicted amount of money, whether positive or negative. And lackeys like this will provide powerful one-time effects. When you get a lackey, you use their power immediately, but the effect is always optional. And some of these cards will let you sell your other cards, which means you can turn them into treasures to score more points at the end of the game. We've also got these scheme cards, which give you objectives and conditions that will score you mega points at the end. And the very last kind of card are these keys. Now these are interesting because you'll get dealt out keys equal to the number of players around the table. And these will give you dibs on which cards you're going to pull from this secret stash. If you have the 1 key, it means you're the first person to take from the stash, the 2 key, the second, and so on and so forth. And this deck contains plenty of schemes, lackeys, and cards that are worth double the set collection, so it pays to get your hands on them first. Then, after 5 rounds are done, you'll pick up your now heaving stash of loot and count up who has the most points, maybe using this handy little score pad that the game comes with. And that is all of Bequest, a nippy 30-minute, 5-round game for fans of games like Cash and Guns. That's Bequest from WizKids. And now on to the next preview.
Up next, we've got my kind of game. This is Birdwatcher, published by Oni Games and designed by Zakia Jaffrey with lovely art from artist Lauren Helton. And what we've got here is a card game of like 1900s birdwatchers trying to take photos of lovely birds of paradise and publish scientific essays. Now, the way you're going to win this game is by having the most points. But as you take photos of birds, often in your tree, and as you publish essays, all of those cards are going to be scored from left to right. You cannot rearrange the order in which you score things. Now that's relevant because lots of the birds, as you can see this one here, score in sets. And for a bird to be in a set, all those cards need to be adjacent in your scoring area. And also, lots of the essays will give you lots of points depending on what's before or after them in your scoring area. So that's a really simple mechanic, but it's not one I can remember seeing before. I mean, I'm sure it's been in games before. At this point, everything has. But hey, I haven't seen it. I think this is cool. So how are we going to go about getting all of these cards into our scoring area as we play the game? Well, it's nice and easy. On your turn, let's imagine it's my turn. I'm the first player. I have the lovely first player camera. I should mention at this point, this is a prototype. Look, this might look like a real box. It's not real. Don't believe everything you say on YouTube, kids. This is an early prototype, and the finished version of Birdwatcher, I'm sure, is going to look even nicer than this. So let's imagine it's your turn. You're the first player. This is a 3-player game we've got set up here. This player has a tree. This player has a tree. This player has a tree. Everyone has some birds in their tree. That's nice. Now on your turn, you get 3 actions, and you can do any action you want up to 3 times. So nice and easy one to start with. You can take a photo of a bird in your tree. You look up at your tree. You think, I want a nice photo of this lovely standard winged bird of paradise. Snap, take a photo, move it down into your little photo book down at the bottom of the tree. But when you do this, the flash and the sound of your camera is going to startle away another bird. So for taking that photo, I also have to send away a bird to the clearing. Now, the clearing in this game is basically a discard pile. It's just that there are 4 of them, and players can always choose where to discard cards, which will also be what birds to cover up and deny their opponents. So that's nice and simple. One action you can do in your turn, take a photo. Another action you can do is do a bird call. Whoop, 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 whoop. I don't know any bird calls, could you tell? When you choose to do a bird call as one of the 3 actions on your turn, you can take all birds of one kite from the jungle and the clearing, taking all of those birds and putting them into your trees. That's good. But as you can see from the board setup I've got here, we've got like 7 different kinds of birds. That's pretty impressive considering there are only 10 different kinds of birds in the game, I think. So another action you can do on your turn is try and mix things up by running into the jungle. If you spend an action running into the jungle, you take all 3 birds in the jungle and you're going to put them into the clearing. And then you're going to immediately refill the jungle. So if I just ran through the jungle, maybe I could spend my 3rd action just doing a bird call for the broad-plumed Lofarina. That's going to go there because now I've got a couple of birds in my tree and I can be prepared to create a set of those broad-plumed Lofarinas in my book. That's good. But when you have birds in your tree, they are not totally safe. No. Another player on their turn can take a photo of a bird in your tree using the action titled Zoom Lens. Now, this is very, very costly. Okay, so to do a zoom lens photo, that takes 2. Not 1, but 2 of the 3 actions you get on your turn. So if we imagine that this player clockwise wanted a photo of my standard winged bird of paradise, first off, they're going to spend 2 actions to take that bird and put it in their store area, but also they have to give me one of their birds, and also I get a free bird from the deck. So when another player takes a photo of a bird in your tree, they take the bird, you do get 2 birds in compensation. That's just straightforward bird economics. So I think that's almost the whole game. You can either take a photo, run into the jungle, do a bird call, take a photo with a zoom lens, or you can publish. You can get your name in print. And the way that works is you simply take 2 actions to grab any of the 3 publications and pop that into your photo journal with the rest of any birds you've taken photos with. A couple of extra wrinkles in Birdwatcher. Not all birds are created equal. Some birds you might take photos of have little bug icons in the corner. And when you take photos of those birds, they are going to provide you with a bug token of a particular type. Now, at the end of the game, you're going to get a bunch of different points if you've collected lots of unique insect tokens in front of you, but also players are going to be tempted to get rid of these tokens as well, because by discarding just 2 insect tokens back to the bank, you can have an extra action on your turn. And there's just one more rule for me to teach you about. These publications that you are going to be publicating, as you publish them on your turn, you're going to see these little book icons in the bottom left. The player around the table that has the most of these book icons at the end of the game is going to receive 5 extra points. And the player with the least of these is going to lose 2 points. So that is Birdwatcher, and I think this game has an awful lot going for it. For one thing, it's simple, which is always obviously a huge plus. More people can play it. For another thing, it's gorgeous, and for a third thing, this is just me being petty, but speaking as a fan of birds, the theme in this game makes an awful lot more sense than the bird game everyone's heard of, which is, of course, Wingspan. In Wingspan, you're introducing birds into some kind of weird Ponzi scheme. In this, you're just taking photos of birds and frightening them and calling them back and frightening them away. It makes way more sense. But that's just me being petty. I like the look of this game a lot. Even just being sat in front of it, like, I'm not even playing properly, but I'm thinking to myself, well, if I did the bird collection now, I would be able to collect 2 birds without wasting any, because there's a limit of 6 birds that you can have in your tree. But look, that's very efficient. And then I've got 3 Western Proteus, which, I mean, that's 14 points if I get 3 of them in a set. That could startle them away. My opponents could notice what I'm doing and steal one of them. This is just, I mean, it's just good, clean fun. This looks like a really, really nice and thought-provoking card game that I would be very excited to give a try. Let's see what the next game is.
Hello, and welcome to this slightly more relaxed version of an AwSHUX preview, where I'm going to be telling you a little bit about Legendary Annihilation. This is an expansion pack to the existing Legendary, a Marvel deck building game, but having never played that game, nor owning a copy, I'm kind of clueless as to what this thing really is. I popped open the box, I looked at the cards, and they're pretty inscrutable for a schlub like me, save for this Rosetta Stone of rules explanation. So I'm going to try and pass as much meaning as I can from this document and tell you about a couple of the things that are in that box. My camera is also running out of battery. The biggest addition to this expansion pack is the Fantastic Four, just in time to save the galaxy from Annihilation. That's what it says on the box. This pack contains 5 new heroes with 14 cards each, 1 rare, 3 uncommons, and 5 of one common and 5 of another. It's got 2 new villain groups of 8 cards each, some double-sided masterminds, and 4 new schemes. From what I can tell with my limited legendary experience, this box will anchor itself around a number of different keywords you can find on some cards. The focus keyword will let you transform recruit points into powerful effects, and it'll let you do those effects as many times as you can pay for. That sounds pretty cool. The man and woman out of time keywords will let you play a card, set it aside, and then have it come back a second time next turn. Momentum means that villains gain more damage as they enter additional city spaces, and the mastermind, Annihilation, has the variant Mass Momentum 2, which means he gets +2 for each villain currently in the city that entered a new city space this turn. I hope this is making sense to people who've played the game. I want to find, it says there's a card called Kang the Conqueror in here. Found him. I can't, it should be on autofocus. I found him. I found Kang the Conqueror. There he is. My goodness. It's Galactus. It doesn't want to focus on these cards. They got Galactus. This is a Galactus card. Pulse waves from the negative zone. Epic Annihilation. The art on these is pretty cool. This is from a comic or something? Iron Lad. I know him. They got the Silver Surfer. They've got the Batman. They've not got Batman. They got the Superman. Oh, they've not got Superman. But they have got Stretching Credibility Super Scroll. They got Stretchy Boy and they got Crunchman. This has 100 new cards. And if you want to see what that looks like this. Looks like there's a bunch of stuff in here. If you like the legendary system, if you like your Fantastic Four and your Green Goblin, that's not the Green Goblin. If you like Kang the Conqueror, and if you like Annihilus, who's going to lead his vast annihilation wave of alien warships from the negative zone to devour the galaxy. He has harnessed the power of one of the most powerful beings in creation, Galactus himself. I think when I was younger, I had something to do with Galactus. I think I had Marvel. Tricked you there, didn't I? You thought you were free of the legendary sofa? But no, I'm back and I'm ready to tell you more about deck building games. What we have here is an expansion to Upper Deck's legendary 007. A deck building game that I previewed a couple AwSHUXes back that has players taking the role of tons of James Bonds. If you want to hear more about that game before delving into the expansion, you can watch my AwSHUX preview from a couple years back, or you can listen to the episode of the Shut Up and Sit Down podcast where we talked about it, which I believe was called James Bond's Sexy Racist Kneecap Live. I think that's a great name for a podcast. But we're not here to talk about that game, we're here to talk about its expansion and all of its cards. Still in shrink. Worth a pretty penny. In this expansion, you get 300 new cards, which can roughly be grouped into 2 classic movies. You've got On Her Majesty's Secret Service and License to Kill. I don't know why I keep getting these previews that require some knowledge of movies. I don't think I've ever seen one. On Her Majesty's Secret Service introduces Ernst Stavro Blofeld, as well as the Condition the Angels of Death scheme and its mission group. He also comes with a bunch of these Institute guards to fight that will KO or wound. License to Kill, on the other hand, will have you fending off Franz Sanchez, shown here in his silvery chrome pajamas. He'll be trying to expand his drug empire, using his Wave Crest divers to do so. Just like with Legendary Marvel, there are a bunch of new mechanics in this set of cards. Impersonate lets heroes copy the base stats of other heroes in your area. Rogue agents will give you powerful abilities, but you can't play any of your basic starter cards if you do so. Brainwash cards turn heroes into villains, and the Angels of Death act as double agents that will disperse a virus. I love that it says here in the rules that the Angels of Death can be brainwashed just like any other hero. License to Kill, on the other hand, introduces cartel cards that'll gum up the works and stop you doing exactly what you want to. So here you're fighting the villain and his schemes alongside a bunch of extra cartel shenanigans. But as with the base game of Legendary 007, the real joy is in this huge stack of cards and their weird combinations of picture and text. I might even be of the controversial opinion that these are better when you haven't seen the movies, because you'll be like, oh no, it's Truman Lodge. Ladies and gentlemen, Truman Lodge. And as someone who hasn't seen the movies, these plastic explosives cards really made me chuckle. Mr. Bond. They're just cigarettes, my dude. Smoking kills. Oh, Mr. Bond. Does it? Boom. And that's what happens in the films. Judi Dench has seen better days. Mr. Bond. Explosive toothpaste. Felix lighter. Angels of Death. Fly Felix to his wedding. I swear there was a Felix card somewhere else in here. Is this him? Is this Felix? I didn't know that Bond's faithful chauffeur was such a major character in the movies. Michael Caine. What is Truman Lodge without his signature gun? Mr. Bond. This guy looks like the guy from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Slugworth. Mr. Bond. That's enough. That's the end of the James Bond expansion video. It's a pretty good game. I played a little bit of the deck builder game. It's very funny. If you don't know anything about the Bond movies, it's pretty funny. It's also a good game. I should mention that. It's a fun game. And that is the end of this utterly shambolic AwSHUX preview. See you in the next one. I don't think it's another Upper Deck one. That would be quite a jump scare if it turned out to be another Upper Deck one. Have a nice day. Stay cool. Love James Bond. Play James Bond Nightfire on PlayStation 2. That game was so good. And maybe, just maybe, pick up a copy of... I'm holding the plastic explosives card. Pick up a copy of the expansion for Legendary 007, James Bond deck building game expansion. Bye! Mr. Bond.
Next up, we are looking at Lizard Wizard, published by Forbidden Games, designed by Glenn Drover, with graphic design by Jacob E. O'Connor, and terrific game artwork from Annie Stegg-Gerard. Glenn Drover, you might remember from his game Raccoon Tycoon, and now the follow-up, Lizard Wizard. I'm seeing a pattern here, and I'm loving it! So, goodness gracious, what do we have here? Well, basically, this is a card game, kinda, but also an engine building game, but with take that elements and some dungeon delving. There's a lot going on here. We should just get stuck in. I've got a 5-player game kind of set up here, which basically means I just didn't remove any cards from these giant, gorgeous decks. But you can see what each player starts with here. You've got 3 reagent cards and a pocket full of mana. And as you play, you're going to be collecting these cards. You're going to be grabbing familiars and making towers and hiring wizards and casting spells, all with the aim of getting yourself victory points. Now, victory points can take the form of gold coins, these nice chunky tokens over here, but victory points can also take the form of matching sets of wizards and towers and spells in the same school, because all of the cards in this game belong to one of 7 schools of magic, such as necromancy, sorcery, alchemy, thaumaturgy, druidry. You get the picture. So, let me explain what you do on your turn. You're going to simply do one action, which is by and large going to relate to one of these decks. So, the nice and simple thing you can do is gather reagents. You're going to take one of the 3 reagent cards you start with, you're going to slap it down, you're going to gather 3 of the reagents on the top half of the card, and then, this is spicy, you're going to increase the value of the reagents printed at the bottom of the card, moving them up these tracks. So as you play, you're going to unavoidably kind of increase the sort of stock values of Mandrake Root and Eye of Newt and stuff. And another way you can spend your turn is not just gathering reagents, but you can transform as many of one reagent of a type that you have. So let's imagine I've got toadstools are looking pretty good here. I could turn like 3 toadstools into 6 mana each for a total of 18 mana. That's going to be great. And then, check this out, I'm going to move the stock marker down by the number of toadstools I turned into mana. So 3. So as you play Lizard Wizard, you're collecting reagents, which you're then turning into mana, and you can use that mana to acquire wizards. So whenever you choose to spend your turn saying, I would like to have this wizard, you enter what is known as a wizard's duel, or you might know it as an auction. You're going to go around the table with players bidding mana that they have, and then whoever wins the auction spends all their mana and acquires that wizard. And the wizard you have is going to help you to gather reagents. Every time you gather reagent, the wizards you've got will also give you an additional reagent printed in their top left corner. But let's imagine we won the auction for this wizard. That's great. That's going to go in front of us and we'll refill the shop. But this might be a good time to tell you that your reagent gathering engine is going to be hamstrung by the fact every player can only hold 10 reagents in front of them. It sounds to me like it's time for us to build a wizard tower. So, a wizard's tower, you can either pay a victory point for it, or a gold coin, or 1 reagent. And once you do that, which is of course another way you can spend your turn, you can see it's quite a straightforward game. Excellently straightforward and easy to teach and learn. That wizard tower then goes in front of you and increases the number of reagents you can hold. But with all this wizard tower stuff you're doing, you're trying to create pairs. Because if you can create a wizard and a tower belonging to the same school and get them in front of you, that's not just going to give you a big victory point payday at the end of the game. It's also going to mean you get victory points for every spell that you cast belonging to that school. So, there's another way you can spend your turn. You can cast a spell. The game's called Lizard Wizard. This should come as a surprise to none of you. So you can collect, buy one of the spells from the shop. That's another way you can spend your turn. You spend 5 mana to acquire the spell, and then you can cast the spell immediately, or you can do it at a later point, by using the reagents at the bottom of this card. And these spells are where Lizard Wizard starts to leave the area of an engine building kind of Eurogame type thing and enter the area of just crazy nonsense. And actually, this is where I started to get really interested. So you can use spells to do things like remove cards from one of the decks, therefore accelerating the end of the game. You can use spells to store absurd amounts of reagents. There's so much happening in this deck. It's absolutely full of ideas, and lots of these spells just let you attack other players. Although, and I like this detail, the take that cards in Lizard Wizard are marked with a star at the bottom, so if you don't want to play with them, it's quite easy to remove them all from the deck. And the final action you can take on your turn is to hire one of these gorgeous familiar cards, because what is a Lizard Wizard without a cool crow or spider familiar? You'd be a laughing stock down at Lizard Wizard Academy. So when you pay the 5 mana that it costs to acquire a familiar on your turn, you have some options. You can either wipe the whole spell shop clean and try and acquire and cast a spell. You can collect a certain kind of reagent and cast a spells. You can collect gold, coins, according to how many cards in front of you you have of the familiar's particular magic type, so necromancy or whatever, or you can enter the dungeon. And if I was quite pleased by the fact that Lizard Wizard is like this engine building game that also has this like take that element, I was even more pleased to discover it has a tiny little push your luck game baked into it. So when you send a familiar to go and get me cool stuff from a dungeon, you are going to just start dealing yourself cards off the top of the dungeon deck. Rubies, that's great. Oh no, floating eye. That's not good. So basically, as you encounter things in the dungeon, you can take a hit. The first hit is fine. You get hits from encountering monsters. But if you get a second hit, you don't get anything from the dungeon. So right now, I have to decide whether to take my rubies and run, or keep going. I'm going to keep going. Oh, it's treasure. I found a mask. Ooh, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. I found 2 gold. I'm going to stop there. I'd be crazy to keep pushing my luck. So look, I've got rubies and a mask and gold. So treasure just gives you straight up victory points, which is nice. But items, these treasures I got, the rubies and the mask, you're going to get points at the end of the game if you have the most items in front of you, or the second most. So players are going to be eyeing up what one another get. And this is maybe my favorite thing in the whole game. There are spells. If you like, let's say, get a lot of items and want to dissuade people from going into the dungeon, there are spells that let you put horrific trap cards into the dungeon that do 2 damage, instantly knocking someone out of the dungeon. Also, every time anyone goes into the dungeon, you shuffle the whole thing again. So as the game goes on, A, players are going to have removed more treasure and items from it, making it full of more bad monsters. And B, players will be doing their best to seed it with traps as well. So that's a lot of fun. I like that a lot. And that is the entirety of Lizard Wizard. It's not a complicated game. It's one of those games where all of the exciting variety is mostly printed on cards. So you've got a short teach ahead of you, and then you just get straight into flipping over spell cards and players going, "What? I didn't know we could do that." I am really excited to play this. And not just because I really like lizards. People watching this might not know this, but I mean, I'm a fan of like almost all of the animal kingdom, but lizards and birds, that's my domain. That would be my school of magic if animals were magic and I was a wizard. None of that's true though, so I guess we just have to see what the next game is. It's a bit sad, really.
What's up, players of games? My name is Phil Skateboards, and I'm here to tell you all about Skate, the card game. A game about pulling off some sick tricks to impress your friends down at the skate park. I really hope that Christian Shelton and Sheltonshire Games don't mind me, Phil Skateboards, being present for this preview video. In Skate the card game, your goal is very simple. All you've got to do is complete 5 tricks, and as soon as you do that, you've won the game, and everyone else goes home because they're just in awe of how good at skateboards you are. At the start of the game, each player is going to get dealt out 2 of these skate cards. And on most of these cards, you're going to see these little depictions of some featses, the same as is on this active trick card in the middle of the table. This one is an ollie, and it has an orange foot and a blue foot planted on it. During the game, you're going to be playing these skate cards in front of you, hoping to match the colours of feet on these cards with the colours of feet on the tricks. If you manage that, you can take the card and put it in front of you, and you're a fifth of the way to winning the game. Now that sounds very simple, so let me tell you about what you do on your turn. You have 4 options available, and the first of those is to push. Pushing has you take a card from your hand and discard it, replacing it with a fresh card from the pile. This is a way of cycling your hand, trying to get the cards you need to complete the certain tricks. However, if at any point you get 2 of these Eat Pavement cards, you are wiped out. You instantly lose all the cards in front of you, and you draw a new hand of cards, because you would be stuck with Eat Pavements otherwise. You can perform this action up to 3 times on your turn, potentially pushing your luck if you've got an Eat Pavement and hoping that you don't draw another. Whew, I'm fine. The second option is to plant, which has you taking one of the skate cards in your hand and planting it on your board in front of you. If you ever manage to match up the symbols exactly with the trick in the middle, this is when you take that trick and place it in front of you. You'll then draw a new trick from the deck. This is a varial kickflip, and if you have cards that match that new trick in front of you, they stay. Everything else goes into the bin. Your third option is to discard one of these kick cards to remove an opponent's planted foot, and then you'll draw a card from the skate deck. However, if the player that you just kicked can play a gnarly card from their hand, they ignore the kick and draw a new card themselves from the skate deck. And the other way that you can use these gnarly cards is planting them on your board as normal, where they count as any colour. And the final way that you can use the gnarly cards is by using them to effectively cancel out Eat Pavement cards. The fourth action you can take is to balance, which has you discarding one of each and drawing a new hand. And once again, eating Pavement is pretty bad. You get rid of all the board cards in front of you and the cards in your hand. So those are the 4 actions on your turn. You'll be trying to plant cards that you need to claim the tricks that you want, and if you manage to get 5, then you win the game. But there's one system that we haven't talked about, and that is the grind system. If on your turn you push 3 times in a row, if you remember, pushing is where you get rid of a card and draw a new one to cycle your hand. If you manage to do it 3 times without eating Pavement, you can get yourself one of these grind cards, placing it in front of you. These have colours that, similarly to the tricks, will match feet in your hand. And if you get 2 grind cards, that counts as a completed grind. From then on, instead of planting a card on your board as normal to complete tricks in the middle of the table, you can instead plant them on the grind cards in front of you. If you manage to do both sides of a grind, you complete that grind as if it were a trick. It's one of the 5 you need to finish the game. And once again, 5 tricks ends the game. As soon as a player manages, that's it. Everyone else goes home. You're too good at skating. And so that is basically all of Skate the card game, designed by Christian Shelton and published by Sheltonshire Games. If you have 2 copies, you can combine them and play a 5 to 8 player game, but normally this is 2 to 4 and takes between 30 to 60 minutes, according to the box that I've just read. This game was lovely to pop open and take a look at. The art on these cards is delightful and sketchy and strange, and also I just love the fact that there's an Eat Pavement card where someone's limbs have fallen off, which seems kind of wild and tricky to do while skating, and the gnarly card is as gnarly as you think a gnarly card would be. That's all of Skate the card game. I can't remember what I called myself. I've been Dan Skateboards. I've been Christopher Ollie. I've been John Pop and Shove It, Christopher Helmet, and I'll see you at the skate park.
Up next, we have a game for you that I've actually played and enjoyed. This is the superbly titled That's Not Lemonade by Tuesday Night Games, created by Matt Fantastic and with the amazing illustrations by Kelsey Kretscher. And what we've got here is a straight up gambling game. The kind of game that you would play at a casino if casinos were just a little bit more fun, and certainly the most attractive game that I have in my collection, which is about You're in. Players in this game run competing lemonade stands. And what I've got here is the deck of cards all distributed so you can see we got a bunch of lemon in here. We have 4 pieces of ice. We have 2 rare and desirable double lemons. And we have 4 That's Not Lemonade cards. So this is basically a game about trying not to drink pee. I'm going to set up a 4-player game for you here. We're going to put 1, 2, 3, 4 little character cards out. And then every player is going to get their own amazing, dinky solo cup. Let me just give this deck a shuffle. So players in That's Not Lemonade are trying to win 3 rounds. And you win a round by not drinking pee, which immediately knocks you out of the round, and by having the most lemons when everyone else has passed or been knocked out. So it plays a bit like blackjack as well. Let's imagine this blue player starts us off. She taps her cup on the table. That means the dealer should deal her a card. And I'm going to play this open-handed so you can see how this works. Oh, she received a lemon. That's good. This player going clockwise. She receives a customer card. Oh no, that's not lemonade. She would immediately reveal that to the table and knock our cup over to show that she's out. Life isn't fair, and certainly this game isn't. This player asks for a card. Oh, that's ice. Remember ice from the deck distribution before? Ice to all the other players is going to look like lemons because you're going to take a card. You're not going to get knocked out, but you haven't actually gotten a point yet. So if you've got 2 ice cards, your hope is that your players will keep drawing cards and get themselves knocked out. This player, she taps and, oh, she's going to receive a lemon as well. And now, if you imagine we're playing all this, of course, secret, this player has a choice, okay? She could pass by, turning her cup upside down and saying, you know what, just this time around, I'm not going to take a card. But then if both of those players pass and either of them have a double lemonade, this player's lost. But what if they both have ice? Maybe these players think that this person has a double lemonade. So much of this game is knowing the exact distribution of cards in the deck. And fortunately, that's printed on your little player mat for you. So let's imagine, though, that this player does ask for another card and she receives double lemons, and then these players either knock themselves out or pass and this player wins. The way that you track your score in this game is by taking a lemon card and putting it next to your player mat to show that you've won 1 point. What that means in this game is that as the game goes on, the number of lemons in the deck gets smaller and smaller, and it gets harder and harder to get points. And that just has this wonderful effect of causing people's grasp on the game to slip away from them, where risks they were taking in the early rounds just don't pay off in later rounds. I think this game is really neat. It's absolutely gorgeous, obviously. It comes in this lovely small box, but also personally, it's in my collection because there just aren't that many board games out there that are straight up gambling. Not just a card game with gambling elements or a board game with some dice rolls. This is just gambling. You can play it late into the night with friends and a few beers, or you can have some very silly fun with children. It's an underserved genre, in my humble opinion. Let's see what the next game is.
Hello and welcome to this AwSHUX preview of Your Friend is Sad, a game by Shen and Friends where players are trying to compete to cheer up a sad friend. How are you going to manage to navigate your friend's complex emotional headspace? By scoring 12 points, of course. Throughout the game, players are going to be trying to match brain goop cards in their hand with cheer up cards in the centre of the table. If you have a matching set of goops, you can discard them to take that card and play it in front of you, earning the points at the bottom. You can also win by acquiring 3 of the same kind of sad, but that's getting ahead of ourselves. What does a turn actually look like? First off, you're going to bin an available brain card from the row down here and replace it with another one. From there, you have the option of drawing 2 brain cards from the deck or trading a card from the available row. From there, you can get rid of a feeling card or a life happens card to draw a life card from this deck here. These are essentially little event cards that you can play later on, but we'll get to those later. And then, if you have the matching brain cards, you can take one of these cheer-ups from the row and score some points. You'll then pass the turn marker on to the next player, and the game continues until someone gets 12 points, or someone collects a stack of 3 of the same kind of sad. But if you feel like someone is getting ahead, you can play these life cards to knock them down a few pegs. These will give you a variety of special effects that often have you grabbing things from other players for your own personal gain. But what's to stop someone just saving up a bunch of cards and then playing them all at once? Well, if you ever have 10 or more cards, you lay them out in a row in front of you and give your friends the pick of what they want from your hand. Once you're back down to 10 cards, you can scoop them up and keep playing. We keep playing until someone wins, at which point they flip over this card and make a slightly happier friend. There's a few other cards hidden in these decks, but that is basically all of Your Friend is Sad by Shen and Friends. Of course, a big draw here is the huge amount of unique art from a variety of webcomic artists. The full list is right here, and it's pretty impressive. The game also includes a solo mode and some advice for what to do if you're actually feeling a bit sad. So that is Your Friend is Sad by Shen and Friends, a little card game of collecting cards and cheering up this wooden token. This is Super Team, a game about everyone's favourite sport, the football, where players are going to use a hand of movement cards to get that ball into the net. This is such a weird one to intro because it's just football, the board game. And I feel like I don't need to explain what football is. But before we continue with our preview of Super Team, it's important to mention that this is a super prototype. None of the pieces you can see here are in any way final. So how do you actually play Super Team? Well, you're going to be playing cards from your hand to take various actions on this board. But before we get to that, let's talk about the setup. Each player will pick a team tactics card, and a captain card, as well as the matching set of team cards to form their deck. You'll mix these unique team cards with a bunch of generic ones, draw a hand of 4, and then distribute your coach markers. These will be slotted into the 5 different aspects of football: pass, shoot, dribble, tackle, and gk, which stands for goalkeeper. These will determine players' effectiveness at taking each of these actions when they start playing the game proper. So let's kick off and show you how you play a round of Super Team. On your turn, you'll perform the following steps: restore, play, and draw. Once you've taken those 4 steps, you'll pass over to your opponent, and when you've reshuffled your draw deck a set number of times, will reach half time. 2 half times and you'll get a full time, and the game will be over, and the person with the most football points will win. Goals. They're called goals, Tom. But let's talk about that turn structure and zoom in a little bit. It's incredibly simple when it comes down to it. First, players will restore, activating any inactive pieces that are laying down by standing them up. Then you will play up to 3 cards, placing each one face up in your discard pile. You must play 1, but you can play up to 3. And then you will draw back up to 4 cards. But let's zoom in on that play phase where you're playing those cards to take actions. Now each of these cards will have a generic set of icons at the bottom, a movement and an action icon. And playing a card for movement is incredibly simple. You just take the piece and move it up to 2 spaces. After a movement, you will make that piece inactive by lying it down, and inactive pieces can be continued to be moved by paying morale tokens. Your other option with a card is to take an action, and there are loads of these, but they're all very simple. Let's say I wanted to pass the ball from this player to this player. I'll go through a 5-step process. I'll select a target, I'll determine the power, which is the number of spaces between me and the target. I can use morale, paying these tokens to improve my chances, and then you will roll dice, taking the green die as standard and adding in these white ones if you've got coach markers in that stat. If I've got 2 in pass, I'll add 2 of these white dice into my roll. You'll then roll and work out if you succeed. Essentially, any number that is greater than 0 will be a success. So here, I've rolled a 4, that pass is happening. Passing is the most straightforward, but the other actions still go through the same process of selecting targets, determining power, using morale, and rolling dice, and then working out the result. But some actions might be blocked by an opponent, which will reduce your die roll by 1 for each opponent in the way. And from here, the actions are super straightforward. Shooting for goal acts exactly the same way as any other action, but with the addition of these strike tiles that might let you slip past the goalie. Dribbling will let your ball carrier slip between opponents, and tackling is a way for the defence to get the ball back. And all of these are resolved in the same way, determining the power, taking dice based on your coach markers, and rolling them. But you can also use these cards, which so far we've just been using for generic movements and actions, to perform tactics. Now each one of these tactics shows a set of instructions that the player might carry out. If you're offensive, for example, this represents a forward pass, and if I manage to complete that forward pass, I'll get 2 free movements and a morale. This is how you get these lovely little stat boosting tokens over here. And lastly, in your deck, you have these unique captain and coach cards that will give you one-off bonuses that break the game a little bit. The captain cards will give a bonus that can only be used by your captain, and the coach card will break the game in a weird and interesting way. Your team also has their own unique ability, and your captain has a special power too. And that is Super Team, a pacey 2-player dueling football game where the player who scores the most goals by full time will win. And with that, we have the end of this card games installment of our AwSHUX preview series. If you enjoyed this video, there are probably more with more previews of different kinds of games. You can check those out somewhere on the screen here. Or if you're watching this between the 22nd and 24th of October, you can come to our online convention, AwSHUX, happening now. See you there. Bye!